So, Steve, do you know how the idea for My Act originally came about? Did I tell you that story?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I was teaching. I was running a skills group for a DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, for a group of inpatients. And originally what had happened is we got to the module, the component of introducing them to mindfulness as a skill. And one of my group participants was like, oh, isn't that thing where like you give us a raisin and we have to eat it like really slow and it's like super boring? And I was like, kind of, but not really. And so I had actually hit some of the literature and I had seen this reporting on what they call mindfulness non-responders. And I really felt like just culturally, the group of folks that I was working with, just the idea of meditation didn't resonate with them in a practical way.
Yeah.
And so I had actually said to them, I asked them if they knew about yoga, and they had said, a little bit. And I said, well, what do you know about yoga? And they said, well, isn't that thing for like pot smoking, tree hugging hippies? And I was like, I don't know about that. And I said, I do yoga. And they were kind of like, really? Because we had a pretty good therapeutic rapport.
Yeah.
And I asked them if I could show them some yoga. And what we did is very similar to what we do here in this My Act program, the seated sun salutation yoga. Very simple stuff that's accommodating to people with all different mobility levels. Mm-hmm. That's what I actually ran with them in that group. And the feedback that I received was really positive. And there was sort of this light bulb moment for me, which was, it had happened before that group, where I was conceptualizing yoga as a mindfulness practice. Mm-hmm. So not as, vagal nerve stimulation, not as some of the other theories that were dominating the yoga literature at the time, but as a mindfulness practice, as an embodied system. Mm-hmm. The whole body as the nervous system. The embodied brain, so to speak. And that was my hope, was to really start to bring yoga more into the mindfulness literature. And that's actually what led me to my first publication, Theorizing Yoga as a Mindfulness Skill, or mindfulness practice. And then moving on from there, actually writing my master's thesis on the subject and doing research on using yoga to teach psychological flexibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of the infancy steps
really interesting.
Of My Act, yeah. And you were a big part of that journey, which I think is really cool.
Well, I even remember the first time that you, after one of my classes, said to me, you don't realize it, but the way that you teach yoga is the way that I practice ACT with my clients.
That's so funny.
And it wasn't until we really started to work together that I was like, oh, that's so true. Like, I use all of those 6 core processes in the way that I teach yoga.
Yeah.
But because I come from a yoga background and not a cognitive behavioral background, I wouldn't even know that language.
Totally.
Right? Like, I was never using terms like diffusion or self as context.
Yeah.
Right? But it was really interesting to me that because I teach yoga the same way. I've always sort of started to teach yoga, especially the more that I began to work with how to move a body more concisely and precisely and how to experience that. Mm-hmm. I didn't recognize before that that's really what I teach is a mindfulness-based yoga practice, mindfulness-based asana practice.
Totally, and to challenge that a little bit, and I realize that I'm gonna put my proverbial money where my mouth is. My mind is telling me this thought right now that, Tim, this is like old hat. Like, this is not an evocative thing to say, but maybe to some of our viewers this might be rather evocative, which is that you were teaching yoga in a way that wasn't about the 60 minutes you spend in a yoga studio on a yoga mat, mm-hmm. practicing asana. You were teaching yoga in a way that was about living and taking yoga off the mat.
Absolutely.
And so what strikes me about this is, like, as we're here now having this conversation and like the sound of a lawnmower goes off in the background or something like that, right? Yeah. Or like a plane goes by and a window rattles. We could totally get caught up in these experiences, and yet I attribute so much of the gains, the significant gains that I made in a short period of time around my own psychological flexibility. I truly attribute that to asana and the wisdom practice of showing up to yoga and learning how to bring that with me into my everyday life.
Yeah. For me, even when I end a class, and I might allude to it a few times while I'm teaching it, is that I will literally say at the end of a class, if this practice is not setting you up to be more mindful off of your mat, then in my opinion, this practice is not working.
Nice.
Right? That there's no usefulness for this practice off of a 2x6 piece of rubber, what's the point?
Totally.
And
I love that strictly pragmatic, like functional contextualistic approach to yoga.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And in the world of yoga, there's this idea sometimes that it's like, my life is over here and my practice is over here. That I actually kind of put my life on hold to go practice yoga, and that somehow that's going to calm me down so that when I get back into my life, I'm not going to punch people. And I say this to students all the time, is that you can't make that separation between your life over here and your yoga practice over here, because you can't put your life on hold to go practice yoga.
Yes.
Right? That's still your life, whether or not you want to admit it. Right? That you're living over here and trying to be more mindful over here, so that when you get off of this 2x6 piece of rubber into the areas of your life where it is a little bit more difficult to be present and to notice what your thoughts are and how you're holding your body or what actions it is that you're doing. You do this over here to set you up for this over here.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so incredible.